third graders. Today is Friday, April 17th. There we go. And so we've made it to Friday. And so here you are watching my fractions on a number line video. After watching this video, you're going to go to your math book and complete lesson 5, practice it, pages 597 to 598. Don't forget to do your multiplication and division of the day. And then if you have time, here's some IXL math questions that you could be working on. So far in our fractions unit, we've talked about how a fraction represents a part of a whole or a part of a set. So this fraction here that I have on the screen is representative of one whole. If I were to cut this one whole into smaller pieces, for example, I could cut it into thirds. This piece represents 1/3 of the whole, right? I've covered, if I place this fraction tile on top of this blue fraction, I've covered up 1/3 of it. Now I've covered up 2/3. And now I've covered up 3/3. 3/3 is the same as one whole. I've covered up the whole thing. 1, 2, 3/3 is the same as one whole. Okay? You can see here that they are the same length, even though my blue one is a little bit bent, which makes it hard to see. But they are the same. Okay? So moving into today's lesson, you're going to want to follow along on page 595. Now, you don't have these fraction tiles at home, unfortunately, so you don't get to do this hands-on part, which is why I'm hoping that you'll follow along with me here. Okay? So if we were in the classroom, we would be doing this build it activity. Represent the fraction 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3 on a number line. Starting at the left, place a 1/3 fraction tile above the number line and trace the tile, shade in the figure. So on this number line, you can see that my number line goes from 0 to 1. You can see this 1 outlining the 3/3. You remember how I said that this one whole is the same as 3/3. They take up the same amount of space. They represent the same value. Okay? So my directions were starting at the left, starting at the smallest, because 1/3 is the smallest, place a fraction tile above the number line. Now my fraction tiles aren't exactly the same shape, but you can see they're about close. So they're talking about right here, from 0 to 1/3, where I've just shaded in green. Okay? This colored in green portion represents 1/3 of the whole, 1/3 of the number line. If I were to place a second 1/3 tile, again, mine are not the same size as these guys here, but this is 1/3 and 2/3, just like this is 1/3 and 2/3. I could color this in here. Maybe, if my pens wanted to work, we'll be blue instead. This is 1/3, and now I have 2/3 of my number line colored in. Okay? So it says, what fraction do the first two shaded areas represent together? So the green and the blue together end up right here on this dotted line. So the green and the blue represent 2/3 together. Now, if I were to shade in the whole thing all the way across, what fraction am I representing? Well, 3/3, as you can see where it ends here, or 1 whole. Okay? Now, how many parts does each fraction represent? You can see in my dotted in lines here that 1/3 represents 1 part of the whole, right? If I were showing you with my fraction tiles, right, 1/3 represents just 1 part of the whole. 2/3, right, if I have 2 of these black pieces, this represents 2 parts of the whole. And if I have 3/3, that represents 3 parts of the whole, okay, or all of the parts of the whole. Okay, so flipping your page over. Now I'm on page 596. This says locate the fraction tiles 1/3 and 2/3 on the number line. One endpoint of the fraction tiles that represent 1/3 is at 0. So you can see if I were to put a fraction tile here, that it would start at 0 and go all the way up here. This is 1/3 of my number line. I'm going to make a tick mark on the number line to show the end point of that fraction tile. Okay, so imagine that this is one fraction tile that represents 1/3, and now I've drawn this tick mark, this little line through the number line to show you if I were labeling this, that this tick mark, this end piece here would represent 1/3. Okay, now it says on one end point of the two fraction tiles that represent 2/3 is at 0, make a tick mark on the number line to show the other end point. So I have 1/3, and now if I add this second 1/3 piece, now I have 2/3. So if I put my tick mark here, now I have 2/3. Uh-oh, blurry. Okay, you can see here that it says each 1/3 fraction tile is the same size. That's important. Remember, same size pieces, equal parts. All right, so then it says, where would we place the tick mark for the fraction 3/3? Well, I think that if this is my 1/3 and it was the same size fraction tile, this is my 2/3 and it was the same size fraction tile, that my 3/3 should go right here, because that's the same distance you can see between the 0 and the 1/3, the 1/3 and the 2/3, and the 2/3 and the 3/3. They're the same size, the same distance apart. Okay. Let's see. Now question 2 says, Sam is making a number line and wants to make a point for 3/4 on the number line. Into how many parts should he divide the number line? Explain. This is a great question because you're going to have to do this in your independent practice. So looking at this here, I'm going to draw my own number line. I wish that it would be straighter, but I don't have a ruler, so I'm just going to try my best. Whoops. It kind of went up a little bit. Silly. Okay. So into how many parts should I divide my number line? Well, I'm going to start with 0 over here, and I'm going to put 1 over here. Okay? I'm going to start at my 1 because I know from up here that if I'm talking about thirds, my 1/2 is 3/3, right? All of the thirds. So down here, if I'm talking about fourths, my 1/2 is the same as 4/4, right? So if this is 0 and this is 1, or 4/4, I also need a 1/4, a 2/4, a 3/4, and then I have my 4/4, which means I'm going to need a line, a tick mark, for my 1/4, my 2/4, and my 3/4. Remember, I want to make them about the same. So I'm going to start with my 2/4. I think that will be about in the middle. Okay, they need to be about the same distance apart, so try and be as precise as you can. Okay, so here's my number line. I have a 0, a 1/4, a 2/4, a 3/4, and a 4/4. So I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 equal parts. Okay? Let's see. So let's go ahead and skip number 3 and let's jump up here to number 4. And I'll do this example question with you, and then you're going to be responsible for doing the front side and as much of the back side on your own as you can. Okay? So this says label each unknown with the fraction of the whole that it represents. So I see here that my 1/2 is 6/6. So that means the rest of my number line is going to be partitioned or divided up into 6. So here's a 6th, a 6th, a 6th. So that must mean that this is also a 6th. a sixth, and a sixth. How many sixths do you think that I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 6 sixths means I have the whole thing. Okay? You go ahead and try on number 5. I'm going to skip number 6 because I think you could do it. And I'm going to do number 7. So looking here, my 1 whole is 4/4. That means my number line is going to be partitioned or divided up into fourths. They already started for me, 1/4. That means this next one would be 2/4, then 3/4. Okay, you can see that these questions are a little bit different. Up here, I labeled all of these 1/6 because that was what the directions told me to do. Label it with the fraction of the whole that it represents. So each of these pieces are sixths. But if I were counting on the number line, this would be 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4, 5, and 6/6. Down here, it asked me to label the fractions, which is why instead of labeling the unit fraction, I'm labeling the actual fraction it represents on here. Okay? Then number 9 says 2/6 is represented by which point on the number line? So if I'm looking at this number line, my whole is 6/6. This one is 4/6. So if I go 4 something 6, I know that this is going to be 4, 5, 6. So this one is 5/6. Before 4/6 would be 3/6. Then 2, then 1. Okay, do you agree? 0, 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, and 6/6. My question is 2/6 is represented by which point? What letter up here shows me 2/6? Letter C shows me 2/6. You go ahead and try number 10. And then the back side is a couple of different word problems. I want you to try your best on all of these through 15. And then bring your questions to Zoom on Tuesday. Remember, we don't have Zoom on Fridays or on Mondays. So I will see you on Tuesday at 9.